Welcome to News with Rupert. I'm your host, Rupert Common. Today we are focusing on the Braided Warriors, a collective of Indigenous youth sovereigntists and land defenders who are taking a stance against resource extraction, police violence, and the crown. Yeah, that's right, Lizzie. They're coming for you. The group is comprised of people from many nations, but they are currently operating from the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish peoples, also known as Van City, baby. What's good? 604, represent 778. So sorry, all the Zoomers out there are super cringing at me right now, but it's okay. It's okay. I promise we can be friends. On February 7th, 2021, the Braided Warriors made their first publicized action when they posted up outside a West Vancouver mansion owned by David Leeds of Leadcore. Leadcore is a construction company working with the TMX pipeline, which is heavily opposed by BC residents and the majority of Indigenous nations and Indian bands. Leadcore literally sounds like you took it from a name generator that Disney and Pixar use for coming up with names for evil corporations in their animated films. You may as well call yourself Death Corp. In this action, the Braided Warriors called for the cancellation of the TMX pipeline, citing the continued genocide of Indigenous people, and they criticized Leadcore for its overt neglect of the climate crisis that humanity is facing. Since then, they have been consistent in both action and word with regards to targeting corporations and agencies involved in TMX. As per their manifesto, they have also stood in solidarity with people, communities, and nations impacted by such powers. This was evident on February 2nd, 2021, when they conducted a drum ceremony at Camp Hopes, formerly KT Camp,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
which was a peer and Indigenous matriarch-led tent city community in Strathcona Park. I say was because on May 2nd, the entire camp was destroyed by the city of Vancouver and bulldozed. Even before this, the camp has faced unreasonable police presence on a regular basis, and the residents have been forcibly removed 2 different times in the past year, most recently from Crab Park in 2020, right around the same time as the Black Lives Matter worldwide protests after George Floyd's murder. In the February 2nd incident, the Braided Warriors were simply responding to a distress call from some of the people who lived in the camp because police were apparently checking a truck on the fringes of the camp and weren't telling the residents why they were there. It was revealed after the fact the police were investigating the murder of an elderly woman named Usha Singh. The suspects were already in custody at the time, so why were the police still at Camp Hopes? Even after their work relating to this murder was completed, the VPD sent up to 100 officers to this camp, including K9 units and a SWAT team. They had assault rifles. According to eyewitness testimony from Camp Hope's residents, the police used physical force such as pushing women by the chest, hitting drums out of people's hands, and grabbing Indigenous youth by their collars. Yeah, sounds like maybe Death Corp had a hand in these operations. In their press conference afterwards, the VPD claimed the residents were being aggressive and were encroaching on the police lines. They said the situation was volatile, and they used a, quote, Code 3 cover, which is when all units report to one place. Really? All units report dangerous and volatile situation? These youth were simply drumming and singing. How many Mel Gibson frickin' movies did you watch as a kid? Since these early demonstrations, the Braided Warriors have gained 20,000 followers on Instagram, and although IG isn't the be-all end-all of a group's identity, it does say something about their skills. It's not easy to reach 20,000 followers on Instagram. Well, it is if you follow trends, constantly promote yourself, and spend countless hours following and unfollowing people, but that's not exactly what the Braided Warriors are doing. They've gained an organic following because they make bold and brave moves and have a clear manifesto. Sharing videos from these actions, often through a live feed, has been helpful in gaining followers online, but also at gaining presence at the actions themselves. Such was the case during the now infamous 3-day protest against insurance companies who backed the TMX. The protests at Chubb Insurance and Liberty Mutual apparently went off without altercations, but the final action at AIG, occurring on February 19th, 2021, ended once again with the use of brute force by the Vancouver Police Department. This included hair pulling, the shoving of an elder, the tearing down of tent structures, the desecration of symbolic red dresses, and an overall level of physical skill that would be more suitable to a washed-up Steven Seagal. Just look at this footage. I'm not sure why any armed police were necessary. Once again, these are youths, most of them beneath the age of 24, non-binary, female youths predominantly. They're being manhandled by fully grown men. This was a peaceful protest. They were carrying out a ceremony of drumming and singing. Due to the violence that they experienced, the Braided Warriors have filmed testimonials and submitted them to the United Nations Human Rights Council. While they were at it, they also asked the UN to intervene with extraction projects and to eradicate the police force from all unceded territory. You gotta admire the audacity of these youths. They're just not afraid to ask for what they want. They're like, hey, UN, these pigs just assaulted us. Yeah, can you help us press charges? Also, while we're at it, can you please remove all of the RCMP from unceded territory of the entire Turtle Island? Thanks, bye! Much like the Leadcore Mansion action, the Braided Warriors showed up at AIG to demand the stopping of the TMX pipeline, citing that it puts their traditional lands at risk of devastating oil spills like the one in Abbotsford, BC in 2020, and has a direct correlation to violence against Indigenous women as proven by the National Inquiry, which officially began in 2016. I've said this before in many of my episodes, and it's a theme I'm going to have to keep returning to. The Missing Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls campaign is not an isolated event. It's connected to attitudes of racism held by all Canadians, historically and in present-day society. It is connected to heavy industry and resource extraction projects. It is connected to man camps, which temporarily house the male workers of these projects. It is connected with the legacy of the Indian Act, which has left generations of Indigenous people without inherited wealth and the curse of intergenerational trauma. It is connected to the police department's treatment of the Indigenous community, and more specifically to the attitudes of apathy in all cases involving missing Indigenous people. The Vancouver Police Department have stood by as Indigenous women disappear and end up murdered by serial killers and rapists. And I am not exaggerating. This is documented in the MMIWG report, and it's reconfirmed by Maclean's magazine, and also by Lorimer Shenher, pictured here, who was the head of VPD's Missing Persons Unit back in 1998 when serial killer Robert Pickton was at his peak. Lorimer has divulged all the details of why it took several years before Pickton was investigated, despite anonymous tips to his exact behaviors. And this may be the most clear example of institutional racism. It's an incident in 1998 when Pickton was accused of attempted murder for the stabbing near fatally of an Indigenous sex worker, but was released with no charges from the courts by the Crown prosecutors. This is confirmed in a CBC article. You can check it out in the description to this episode. I'll put the link to the article. The Crown prosecutor, Randy Connor, stated that the Indigenous lady who was a victim of Pickton wasn't believable in her testimony. So her eyewitness account of being stabbed nearly to death was not taken into consideration in the court, and Pickton went free. Now, this was done because she was a heroin user at the time, but I also think it was because she's Indigenous and a sex worker, and she's receiving stigmatization for all those things together, and it's just blatant racism. Besides that, just because you're doing drugs, how does that mean you don't remember getting stabbed nearly to death? Like, you have the wounds, you were there, you know? It doesn't affect your knowledge of your experience. So it's also just a complete disrespect to human beings who are in addictions. I don't know if Randy Connor has atoned for that mistake, but there's blood on her hands and on the hands of the system and of the police and of the Crown, because once Pickton was released in 1998 from that clear attempted murder that any sane and non-racist person would have convicted him for, he went free and murdered 19 more women. So we have a case here where, because of institutional racism, Native women have been killed because of Canada. At that point, it's Pickton and the police and the courts. So when people like the Braided Warriors say, "F the police," can you see why? Would you not say, "Fuck the police"? Yeah, fuck them. If your relative or friend or mother or sister or cousin or auntie was taken and the police refused to help, to symbolize the epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit, people like the Braided Warriors and land defenders like the Tiny House Warriors will hang up red dresses or wear red. This is something in Indigenous communities that is very well known. Red Dress Day just happened on May 5th, It's when Canada as a colonial state has finally recognized there's an issue. So Red Dress Day is good as a gateway for knowledge for people to be introduced to this topic, but it's not that we just don't stop there. We have to see why this is happening. Really, this show is my piece in helping bring awareness, but you should listen to the people from those communities more than me. This is why I suggest checking out Pam Palmater. She is a lawyer with much experience, as well as an Indigenous land defender and spokesperson. She has a video, go check it out. The link is in my description. Back to the Braided Warriors. Shortly after the AIG protest, the Trans Mountain Corp requested that the Canadian Energy Regulator keep the identities of its insurers private. On April 29th, that wish was granted. This simply proves that the actions of the Braided Warriors worked. They targeted companies responsible for insuring the TMX pipeline, and then the operators got shook. And they took all these measures to protect their collaborators from public scrutiny. They do this because they know public opinion is swaying. This is also evidenced by Munich Re, who insured the Nord Stream 2 pipeline in Europe, and Axis Capital, who insured a pipeline in Alaska. Both of these companies have pulled back. And when companies do this, it's a big victory. It shows that the work of people like David Suzuki, Greta Thunberg, and Autumn Peltier have helped the world see that the climate crisis is a collective responsibility, and these big companies can tip the balance. But it's not just climate concerns that they're acting on. Sometimes it's taking a stance against unfair treatment from the government, and from the courts, and from police. Such is the case with Indigenous elder Stacey Gallagher, who is also known as Uncle Stacey. He's facing 90 days in jail for conducting a drum ceremony in an injunction zone. On March 2nd, around the same time news of this broke, the Braided Warriors led a blockade of the Vancouver Points at Clark and Hastings intersection to protest his arrest and demand all the charges be dropped from all land offenders. According to Vice World News, over 200 Indigenous people have been arrested since 2018 for similar peaceful actions against the pipeline. To reiterate, 90 days in jail for drumming and singing? And he didn't even get the proper 5-step process of being warned to leave the injunction zone, which is their mandate. He was arrested based off video evidence. At the blockade, 4 of the Braided Warriors demonstrators were arrested. Such is the sacrifice these people make to take a stand against resource extraction and for their people. Following this, on March 12th, they occupied the train tracks next to Renfrew SkyTrain Station, once again in East Vancouver, as a part of the Line 3 Land Defenders Week of Action. This is a campaign spearheaded by Honor the Earth, an Indigenous-led organization currently fighting an Enbridge pipeline through the Anishinaabe territory in Minnesota. Gathering momentum from these successes, the Braided Warriors carried out a more covert op on April 3rd, 2021, when 2 of their members, who were settlers and non-Indigenous, chained themselves to heavy machinery at the Blue River site on Secwepemc territory. They were there for 12 hours before being served a charge of breaking and entering, mischief, and breaching an injunction zone. The Braided Warriors have actual drone footage of this, and they've documented it very well on their Instagram site, as they do with all their actions. On Tuesday, April 27th, the Warriors held a protest for Denisoulin poet, filmmaker, and land defender Victoria Redson, who has been apparently charged with assaulting police officers. I don't know how an unarmed 21-year-old can assault 2 armored police officers. I'm not sure how that's really going to happen. So it seems that they kind of ramp up the charges to make the land defenders look worse than they are. And to add to this, she was assaulted by the police officers. Clearly the police are in a position of power over her. So it would stand to reason that she was probably manhandled by them, not the other way around. Added to this, it was documented in the Vice magazine article that oftentimes the judges who are in charge of putting out the sentence against land offenders are insensitive to the cause and tone deaf to Indigenous culture. They're coming at them with really the heaviest sentencing that the law could give. If you really look at what the land defenders are doing, they're drumming, they're singing, they're burning sage, they're standing up against resource extraction. First and foremost, they're protecting their land, their traditional territory, but this has an effect for all of us because they're protecting the land and water we all live on. Well, I hope you enjoyed my summary of the Braided Warriors' actions from January to May of 2021. It's really just a snippet of what they've done, and I'm in no way affiliated with their organization. I'm just an independent news channel on YouTube and Instagram, doing what I can to synthesize their actions, to unpack some of the meaning, and hopefully to enlighten you. Please tune in to other episodes of News with Rupert. This season, season 2, we are expanding to include hip-hop culture and interviews, satire, music performances, protest songs, comedy rap, you name it. This is a whole web series, and this is season 2, episode 1. Once again, I'm Rupert Common, and this has been News with Rupert.